Chapter 3. Rough Transition. The year was 1998, and high school would prove to be yet another defining moment in my life. The first day of high school was similar to my first day at West Fulton Middle School because I was attending school with most of the same students from Corn Middle School. The fact that there were similar faces at school made me feel a bit of comfort. However, I had not forgotten that I still wasn't popular or liked like the other kids were. Regardless of what I was thinking or how I felt, one thing I didn't see changing for the next year was the fact that I was now an insecure freshman in high school. To add to this difficult realization, I was not attending any old high school. I was a freshman at Alonzo Aristotle Crim High School. This school had a well-known reputation for violence and even had a nickname of Crime High School. Crim High School was formerly named Murphy High School, and my mom and her siblings went there. For many years, my grandparents had a family home located at 2395 Boulevard Drive, right off of 2nd Avenue, which was not too far from the East Lake Meadows housing projects. Those housing projects were often referred to as Little Vietnam. It was because all of the violence that was associated with it. During my mom's high school days, Murphy High School had another nickname too, Murder High. From Little Vietnam to Murder High to Crime High. Here we go. Here I was, a second-generation pope in the same neighborhood and same school building as my preceding generation. The reputation of my school was pretty much the same. The only difference was the name. Whether it was called Murphy High, Murder High, Crim High, or Crime High, I was there, still trying to fit in and still trying to find my place. Still trying to be everyone except me and becoming a product of my environment in the process. In fact, I was slowly becoming a product of all of my environments put together. The thing is, I learned quickly that there was not much of a difference between any of the environments I grew up in. To be honest with you, I had no idea that what I witnessed growing up was actually traumatizing. I thought it was just your normal everyday drama. Since poverty looked the same in each new neighborhood, school, and community, I figured that this was the way everyone lived. I unknowingly normalized abnormal. Unlike at Corn Middle School, I was fortunate enough to have a big cousin that was a senior at Crim High School during my freshman year. He had a well-known reputation for being nice at throwing them hands, which meant fighting. This cousin was also very popular and well-respected. He was on a football team, basketball team, and ran track. When you talk about gifted, he was definitely it, and so I had someone else I wanted to be like. I didn't feel bad about wanting to be like my big cousin because he was family. He was liked. He was respected. Bottom line, he wasn't me. I was truly proud to be his little cousin. Although I had never played any organized sports before, I loved football. As a little kid, I used to say that I wanted to be a football player when I grew up. For that reason, I decided to join the Crim High School football team like my cousin, but I wasn't very athletic. Compared to some of the other guys on the team who were exceptionally talented, I was often overlooked and my jersey was always the cleanest after every game. As a freshman football player, that was sort of a hazing ritual that you had to go through at Crim. At least I had to go through it. I remember one day in the locker room, one of the seniors mentioned slapping me to another teammate. What this player didn't know was that he was actually saying what he was going to do to me to my big cousin. My cousin laughed and casually asked him, "Who you talking about slapping?" When the senior pointed at me, he soon regretted it. As you probably guessed by now, things didn't work out so well for that senior on that day. My cousin did not hesitate getting in his face, letting that senior know that I was his little cousin and that he wasn't going to do anything or touch me, period. I was astonished at how fast the senior began to apologize and try to make light of the situation. This was surprising to me because this particular senior my cousin had just threatened was known as one of the most feared and respected guys on the football team. It was in that moment I realized just how much juice my cousin really had. Being his little cousin, man, I felt like I was untouchable, especially when my big cousin was around. The only thing I found strange was that my cousin always wanted me to do the right thing in high school. He tried to keep me out of trouble even when he himself would get into trouble. I remember trying to skip class one day and I ran into him. This was the first and only time he had ever appeared angry at me. He looked at me and asked me what in the curse word I was doing cutting class. I was caught off guard because to me, it looked like he was doing the exact same thing. I figured that we could cut class together. Big Cuz wasted no time firmly telling me to take my curse word back to class. This wasn't the only time he would prevent me from making some of the same poor choices he was making. I didn't understand it back then, but now I get it. You want the best for those you care about, even if that best does not include you. As I think back on a life-challenging conversation between one of my former classmates from middle school and my big cousin, it was definitely a defining moment in my lifetime. This particular classmate of mine was surprised to hear that my cousin and I were related. I remember him saying to my cousin, "Hey, is this your cousin? Man, your cousin's smart. I'm talking about like a computer, bro." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was another popular and respected peer I knew from middle school saying this about me to my big cousin who was also popular and respected in high school. The way the guy said it with such passion forced me to believe that he actually meant what he had just said. Wow, I had no idea that this guy thought so highly of me, and for so long. I thought everyone ignored me in middle school. I was literally speechless. Again, I wasn't aware of the fact that this was another glimpse into what my true purpose looked like. I knew I was smart, but thought I was able to hide it so I would not be teased about it on top of everything else my peers made fun of me about. This guy saw right through my act and made it known that day. My big cousin obviously saw something in me too that I didn't recognize in myself. He also recognized my true potential, and that is why he was always on my back, trying to keep me from following in his footsteps. It's funny how other people can see in you what you either can't see or refuse to see in yourself. It's like the signs were always there to encourage me, yet I was still choosing to view myself in a negative way. Although people that had already had the respect that I wanted was actually validating me for who I was still trying to be somebody I wasn't. What he said showed me then that it's okay to be smart, gifted, and talented. But I never thought so. I was too busy trying to be a follower. The whole time I was supposed to be leading. Have you ever found yourself trying too hard to be a follower or trying too hard to fit into circles when you are actually a star? If so, then I can relate, because that was me. I didn't really appreciate my own value. I was completely unaware of my own significance and importance. I believed the lies, worthless, unwanted, rejected. My life and positivity had nothing in common, and that was my truth. At Crim, I had a literature teacher that also taught drama class. This teacher was always respectful to me, so I decided to take drama class too. I really enjoyed acting and being in the stage plays. Believe it or not, people actually liked the characters I played. I guess I had already been acting for years. After all, I was always trying, or better yet, acting like the cool kids and trying to act tougher than I really was. No matter how much I loved drama class and the stage plays, I still wasn't good enough or popular enough to win any accolades, though. It's like the same people always got all the hand claps and awards. Not because they were that much more talented, but perhaps because they were just more popular. Perhaps they were doing what I wasn't doing, which was accepting themselves. They knew who they were and didn't need to act like anyone else. Even still, knowing this didn't make me feel more confident, but even more insecure, because I simply didn't know me. Still searching for my place in this gigantic world called high school, I tried all sorts of different things. I even tried to make connections with other people from other schools and neighborhoods. I was drawn to some of these people because they seemed to always have money, nice clothes, shoes, and respect. I later found out how they were getting their money. I even found out how they were getting their respect too. Illegally. To me, it didn't matter how they were getting it. All I knew was that I wanted what they had. I was tired of wearing old hand-me-down clothes and being poor. I was tired of being picked on. I wanted some money too. I wanted some respect too. And now I knew just how I would get it. You see, the guys I had connected with, they were drug dealers, and that's how they got their money, for the clothes and shoes they wore. I wasn't new to the drug scene because it was always fluent in my neighborhood, and unfortunately, in my household too. But hanging around these guys, I quickly came to the realization that not only did they sell drugs, they were gang members too. Their gang affiliation is why they were feared and respected. The interesting thing about it was that they were members of the same gang that my brother and I had secretly joined while we were living on the west side of Atlanta, attending West Fulton Middle School. When we moved away from the west side, we lost contact with those guys. Well, I lost contact with them. My brother Chris had a different story because he was always running the streets, going wherever he wanted to go and doing whatever he wanted to do. Me, I was too afraid of my mom and her proper forms of persuasion, as my late Uncle Anthony called it, when I misbehaved. So I stayed home. Don't laugh at me too hard. The name of the gang will not be mentioned in this book because I am no longer active and I do not wish to promote it or that lifestyle. What I will say is that things definitely started to change for me from that point on. I started making my own money, and I started gaining some respect too. The gang became my new family. In that family, there were guys called Big Homie or OG. The Big Homie is one who has been in the game for a while, knows the ins and outs, and is respected because of it. One of the Big Homies found out that I could not fight and forced me to fight with other members of the gang regularly until he knew I was able to hold my own. Fighting with other guys that were twice my size. Fighting with guys that had been throwing hands for years. Guys that could literally punch someone so hard they would fall asleep instantly. This was my way back in, and I had to do it. I had to do what I had to do. Some would say that fighting these type of guys every day was cruel. I would say I finally learned how to fight. I was finally able to defend myself. It was a weird way to learn, but I did. I even had a very large group of people that were willing to fight for me, too. One day, out of nowhere, one of my peers decided to try and fight me after school. I don't know the true reason. I can only guess that it was simply because he figured he could beat me easily. What he did not know was that another one of my cousins and a few associates who were also members of the same gang were outside waiting for me after school that day. You see, I never was the big or muscular type, but my cousin was. Some of the other members of the gang were too. All I had to do was say the word, and believe it or not, that guy would have never known what hit him. Although I now had the power to get somebody touched and the reinforcements to throw my weight around, I could not bring myself to do it. On the other side, I knew back then I was not that type of person. I was always the merciful and compassionate type. This was probably because I knew how it felt personally to be bullied and beat up. I did not have it in me, or so I thought. Along with this newfound knowledge and reinforcements came a new me. I did not get that one guy from my high school beat up, but I cannot say the same for other people after that. Let's just say that sometimes people and situations can cause you to become someone you were never meant to be. They can even make your heart turn cold at times. There were times I actually became the bully and the aggressor. In the midst of all the drama I was now willingly a part of, there was always something inside of me convicting me of my destructive behavior. There was something inside of me saying I could not continue to purposely cause pain to others for the sake of wanting to fit in. Remember, I was typically the merciful and compassionate type. This was mostly because although I was growing up in those rough conditions, I was also raised in the church. I was taught better, and I definitely knew better. Oftentimes, I'd wonder if growing up in the church was actually the reason why I was not able to fit in and was so passive for so long. I'm not sure, but I do know that if it had not been for my relationship with God, I don't think I would have survived some of the things I've seen. The year was 2002, and it was my senior year at Crim High School. Yep, from freshman to senior year, I managed to stay at the same school, but things were taking a turn for the worse. After riding the bench on my high school football team most of the season, I was finally called to play. I remember being so excited that I went home screaming to my mom, "Mom, I'm playing in the game this Friday night." I was expecting the same excitement in return, but boy, was I wrong. "I don't care nothing about no game. You either find a way to bring some more money in this house or find somewhere else to stay," she said. My brother-in-law and I made eye contact. I tried to play it off, but he could read in my demeanor that I was ashamed and felt embarrassed. He didn't say anything, and neither did I. He just turned around, got into his silver Dodge Ram truck, and backed out of the driveway. I still played in the game that Friday night, but by Sunday, while my mom was at church, I packed all of my clothes in trash bags, piled them up on the side of the house, and left the only home I knew. I couldn't believe that at 17 years old, I could no longer be a typical high school student, but someone that had to find a better paying job and somewhere to live. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do next. I just began walking with the clothes on my back and about $300 worth of crack in my pocket. All of the clothes I packed in trash bags were still on the side of my house, and I was praying that they would still be there when I got back. I was so hurt and confused. After a long while of walking in a daze, I ended up at my cousin Eric's house. My cousin Eric, or Big E as everyone called him, is a true family man. He didn't take mess from anyone and spoke his mind about what he felt was right. On this day, though, he took me right back home. I was still disappointed, so I stayed outside while Big E and his wife Renee went inside to talk to my mom. I don't know what was said, but when they came outside, Big E said that I could come with them. So I grabbed my bags and put them in the back of their van. When we got back to their home, Big E showed me where I could sleep and where I could put my clothes. While unpacking, all of the $300 worth of crack fell out my pockets. My heart stopped. Big E took a deep breath, looked me in the eye, and lifted his hand. I flinched, thinking that the physical abuse from my younger years was about to repeat itself. However, he placed his hand on my shoulder and gave me a man-to-man talk. "I understand your circumstances and the environment that you come from. I'm not telling you what to do or not to do. And you are more than welcome to crash here, but you have to respect my house and my family." Those were some of the realest words I had ever heard from a man at that time, which is why in my heart, I knew I could never sell crack while living under his roof. I went to the bathroom and flushed every bit of crack I had on me down the toilet. That night, I couldn't fall asleep right away. I stayed up thinking about all that had happened, what my mom said to me, what Big E said to me, respect, what I did, where I was, and how my life was changing so suddenly. Next thing I knew, the alarm clock was going off because it was time for me to go to school. Since I now lived further away from my school, I had to get up earlier. Away from home, no money, crack gone. Man, what a rough transition. Around homecoming time, I was running for the position of Mr. Crim High School. I didn't really want to run for the position, but my counselor and my assistant principal talked me into it. So there I was, waiting for my turn to give my speech. This would be my first time actually speaking publicly, unless you count that one time back in 7th grade during the That's Right presentation or the Black History program back in 5th grade. What made this time so different was that there was no music with this presentation. It was not a song. It was a speech, and there was no one responsible for the outcome but me. The gym was jam-packed with the entire school population. It's my turn to give my speech. Here I go. I step up to the microphone and nervously gave the quick campaign speech I had prepared. Take a guess at what happened. Go on, I'll wait. Now let's see if you guessed correctly. The entire gym erupted. All I could hear was the loud, thunderous sounds of booing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like I was having a nightmare, but I was wide awake, so this was real. I was heartbroken, embarrassed, and ultimately rejected. I was shown no mercy and no compassion. I wanted to run and hide, but there was no place I could hide because everyone had witnessed or participated in my demise. Talk about a bad day. In spite of the pain and shame I was feeling, I had to stand there and take it as every other candidate received welcoming cheers and applause. This was the day it was confirmed that I was not accepted or respected by the majority of my high school peers. Although I felt the hurt so deep that day, this was yet another defining moment in my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but that day actually gave me a courage that I didn't know I had. From that moment on, I was no longer afraid to pick up a microphone and stand on a stage in public. As a matter of fact, research shows that the number one fear for about 98% of the people on the planet is actually public speaking. Thanks to that day, I had already experienced the worst case scenario and already survived what 98% of the world's population feared the most. Although I still get nervous, I'm definitely no longer afraid. I went on from that day to actually be voted most talented by my peers in our senior class yearbook. Who knew? All those times I did not get a round of applause during the stage plays. That time I got booed, those times I got bullied, my talent was still recognized. I was even selected to sing at our high school graduation that was held at the Civic Center in Atlanta, Georgia. I was finally starting to learn that tests and trials come not to break us, but to actually make us. That is, if we allow the growth process to take place. Discovery moment. Throughout my entire childhood, I was constantly trying to avoid facing my fears and insecurities. I was always trying to hide or cover up who I was, my intellect, or my talent. I was constantly living up to the lies my situations led me to believe. I was trying so hard to run from the rejection, I ended up running into it almost everywhere I went. Little did I know the rejection, the abandonment, the bullying, and all the suffering I had endured was making me stronger mentally. I was actually growing through all of the pain and hurt I was experiencing. It wasn't happening to me, it was happening for me. What struggles can you relate to from this chapter? What emotions did you feel while reflecting and writing down those struggles? Do you know others that are experiencing similar struggles? How would you encourage them? What are some things you would have done differently